Welcome to my channel and welcome to this video where I'll be going over my thought process in how I built my Kronos and Apep auto clear teams. One important note before we start is that this is my account where I am not using any gacha records, which means that any units that you can only acquire via golden records, shimmer records or elemental records I will not use. Anything that you can get via ripples or event shops or collab shops or of course regular event rewards or fusions is fine, but no gacha units. Let's start by looking at my Apep team because I actually started with creating that one first, simply due to the fact that I already had a generic team that cleared Kronos 7 or 8 I believe, very consistently at that point. Okay. Apep has two major mechanics that you need to look at. First one is that, as you can see, all of his attacks apply poison, and of course his passive also means that any attacker gets poison when they attack him. So it is very important to note poison as a debuff does percentage HP damage, 4% I believe, and that stacks. Depending on how many of the debuffs you have, you can have 6, you could have 10, and that is a lot of damage. There are two ways around getting annihilated by poison. The first and most common one would be immunity. If you apply immunity to your espers, they are immune to any negative effects that you want to put on them, such as poison. Another one is poison resistance, which is exclusive to Jacob, and that is also a very viable strategy to stop the poison on your team. The second attack is his Chaos Surging, which I believe has 7 stacks, and each time he gets attacked or hit with a damage number, that passive will go down by 1 stack. Once it hits 0, he will do an attack. And that means that any espers that you use that have multiple hit mechanics, such as for example Li Ling with his skill 2 and skill 3, are very bad here if you don't want that to happen a lot. There are comps, especially with Jacob, where you want that to happen, but this is more of a turtle composition, so making sure that none of the espers die instead of clearing it as quickly as possible, which means we don't want this. Now to look over the team comp. There are only really 3 essential parts in here that you need to consider. The first is immunity, which I'll be getting from Gabrielle and Changpu. Gabrielle has it on her skill 3, which she uses as soon as possible, which means Gabrielle's immunity usually is the first immunity to go up. This is on a 4-turn cooldown, so she gets about 50% coverage. I'm saying about because due to the different speed values of the espers, some will go faster or slower than her, meaning they might actually have lost the immunity already or still have a stack, and due to that difference it is very possible to take more poison stacks even though you technically would have enough coverage. The second is Changpu. In order for her to apply hers, she needs to be ascended. All of my espers are ascended because farming ascension points or the sonic element thingies is not hard. Just takes stamina, and you should do this as soon as possible because some of these ascensions are very strong. Changpu is a bit different. While she also only has 3 turns cooldown, which helps the coverage even more, hers is tied behind healing, so she will not actually use this for the immunity itself, but to heal her team. And usually at the start of a fight, your team isn't really damaged, so she will usually use this 1 or 2 turns in, at which point Gabrielle's immunity will already have at least one turn. Well, lasted one turn. These two together give about a 90% coverage. You'll see that live in game in a bit. Yasuo isn't necessary at all. It's just I like her attack up buff. 40% more damage is fine for me, and her healing on her skill 2 also is useful, but you can easily replace her with just about anything that still only does single target attacks and single hit attacks. So she isn't strictly necessary. Another good option would be Dahlia, for example, because she also makes sure your team goes a bit faster by granting them AP. Drew is not the best DPS for this, but he's the best I have available, because all of his attacks only hit a single time and they do substantial damage. I built him around C rate to reduce the cooldown of his skill 3. His skill 3 is his hardest hitting attack with 260% attack scaling. The secondary effect does not matter for boss fights, and his skill 1 will reduce his skill 3 cooldown by 1 turn each time he crits. With 97%, that is very often, and it only has a cooldown of 3 turns, which means usually he does Death Judgment, then Shadow Shock, Piercing Strike, and then Death Judgment is up again. Another one is Melanie. It is important to note here, Melanie is also not the best possible choice. I have her because she gives a speed boost to the entire team of 15%. There are other espers that do it, Sander for example, or TA. And she does AP reduction on the enemy, which just means enemy gets less turns, you have more turns to deal the damage and the effects that you want to. This makes it a bit more consistent. But if you have Sander or TA, they tend to be a better choice here. One more thing, all of my espers will have a speed primary stat Mui2 relic, which means their speed is higher than you expect on most comps. This is a personal preference and you don't have to do it. I just, from my testing, feel this has more benefit, also on my DPS. Drew also has one, although not a 6-star. Just provides more benefit to the entire flow of combat rather than just giving them more damage or more health. One more thing is, of course, the health and defense stats. You want both of them decently high. I'd say about 20,000 health is a good point, and defense 1.3000 to 1.4000. Okay, let's see how this actually performs in action. Let's just quickly breeze through the first 2 waves, and then I'll slow this down to explain what is happening. But yeah, for the first 2 waves, not really much happening. You just kind of clear them as quickly as you can. And like I said, this is not a clear comp meant to do sub-minute runs, which are possible, mind you, but rather a comp that is very accessible, because you don't really need much to have success rate here, and very high consistency. It's not 100% because RNG just sometimes is not on your side, and you will still die. It's for me about 1 in 25 that I lose an Apep, or 1 in 15 for Kronos. Usually the one to die first is Melanie, because she has the least defense. So I will probably ascend her to 6 stars at some point, giving her more defense and HP to me slightly more durable. Let's reduce this to 1 times. As you can see here, the immunity procced, and at the same time Apep got a damage reduction. And as you can see, each time they get hit, the passive goes down. Gabrielle's skill 2 attacks 3 times, but the defense down on Apep, which is 60%, defense reduction is very useful. For the most part, they are all just kind of doing their thing, and as you can see, currently they get poison stacks, which is because none of them are damaged enough for Changpu to decide, hey, I should heal this. But that should happen in a bit. Let's start speeding this up a bit. Well, or Gabriel does it, that also works. And now we have the immunity again, and time to just heal them up. As you can see, Apep just went from almost ready for the turn to only halfway down, by Melanie using her skill 3. You can also do this with a cleanse or purify Esper, although I think personally they have a bit less consistency because you can't really prevent poison from happening, and if they just go very late, it's kinda here and there. As you can see, there was not significant damage dealt to any just yet. Of course, this is an auto battle, so you can't really control which skills get used when. So it's important to consider the order in which Espers tend to use their skills. Like Changpu using hers when she's healing, which does result in basically wasted immunity from her point a couple of times in this fight. Which, despite having a 3-turn cooldown, results in not too high of an uptime for immunity. But just getting hit once due to all the Espers only attacking once, besides Gabriel of course, it usually isn't a big deal if it's down for a turn. Like one poison stack is not going to kill you. And there we go, that is an Apep 10 clear.
Uploading the battle data.
Your order is my priority.
And no relics that I actually want to use, which you'll get used to rather soon, if you haven't already. Okay, let's do the same thing for Kronos. The team looks very similar, although there's one difference that I'll be explaining. For Kronos, the fight goes a bit different, and that you don't have to really deal with debuffs. I mean, his pill drop will stun sometimes, where immunity certainly helps, but it's not required. So, what Kronos does a lot is that it deals more damage the lower the HP of your Espers are. So having a decent defense stat here is very important. And if you read the Earthshake ability, he will do 2 strikes. The first one dealing damage to all your Espers, and the second one dealing damage to the one with the least health after that. The so-called pillar drop. This pillar drop also is important to note because when he kills someone with it, he will do another attack immediately after, which means he does exploitation because he gets a bonus turn. This only happens once, but well, that is a lot of damage that you really want to negate. So while immunity isn't important here, Changpu has very strong healing capabilities, which is why she's still here. Gabrielle can increase your defense and at the same time decrease the enemy's attack, meaning if both of them are up, oh, Kronos is not going to do a lot of damage. But they, especially the attack down that you can do on the enemy, This is not necessarily a hit always, because it's a negative debuff applied to an enemy, the 20% chance to miss still applies. But it helps when it is, because then you can heal up. Yasura here is primarily for the heal assist, as well as the attack up, so pretty similar to the Apep. Melanie, exact same reason as an Apep. AP down and a speed cap ability is just very powerful. Now, the more questionable choice here is Tang Yun. I could use Drew instead, but Drew does not really deal all that much damage, because he's more centered around hitting multiple enemies with his skill 3 once he kills someone, which of course with the boss he's not going to do. And Tang Yun has elemental disadvantage. You can see that by this little chart here, which means he has a higher miss rate and a lower crit rate on the enemy. But from my testing, he actually shaves off about 30 seconds of the fight. So that's why he's still there. He's just a very powerful unit in general. And here especially, the about 20,000 HP and 1.3 to 1.4 thousand defense is very important. Like I said, this fight is a bit less consistent, because the moment one of your Espers dies, the fight is basically over. Well, let's see how my team deals with this. Let's speed this up. This will actually take a bit longer to clear due to the elemental disadvantage and not hitting all 3 enemies after the first one dies. But he will make good on that time during the Kronos fight. For my team, again, it is primarily Melanie that dies first, so when possible I will probably 6-star soon, although I will do one other Esper first, because I'm working on my Fafnir auto-clear team, which is a lot harder to do as a free-to-play account. Oh well, free-to-play, and no gacha Esper account. Yeah, as you can see, this last one just, it takes a bit to take down. The powerful ability of Tang Yun is that when he crits with a skill 3, he automatically triggers his pursuit, which will make him attack with his skill 1.
And get ready for the battle.
That can chain up to ridiculous amounts. As you can see here, the attack down did not trigger on Apep, not Apep, Kronos. The defense down did, which is useful. As you can see, crit pursuit, which was over 40,000 damage just from that one thing. And he has a rather low cooldown in it as well, so it helps clearing him. There, his blessing tablet came up, which gives them automatically a ton. And since immunity wasn't up, that means they're all now stunned. Well, have a high chance to be. Which costs us some time, but it's not the end of the world, as you can see. This was a bit worse because of the elemental disadvantage, but it's still more than Drew would do. That was a close one, so let's see that Chengpu gets sealed up. Sometimes you can survive one of your Espers getting killed, but it's not always a good idea. So this is also one of the fights where slightly faster clear time actually increases consistency, as long as you don't go fast by sacrificing defense too much. And there we go, that was a Kronos clear, although like you saw, Changpu got rather low. And her stats aren't that bad.
I'm more powerful.
And no 6-star relic for us. If you look at Changpu, she also has a rather low defense. She already has the defense relic, but I don't really have any good defense substats anywhere. What was in there? What was in there? That's really it. 25 hit don't really matter. Here it's actually important to note, at level 50, Changpu gets more defense from this flat stat primary than she would get from a percentage one. But one of the things you can do, or that I probably do soon, to increase the survivability, is to put this rally up to plus 12. But yeah, that is my Kronos clear team. And earlier the Apep team. I hope going a bit over what I thought about when creating a team like this, and don't get me wrong, there was a lot of testing involved, and changing relics around, seeing what worked, what didn't. But having a strategy for the mechanics the boss has you deal with is very useful, and will increase your consistency. So I hope this helped, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you for watching.